When the Korean Mafia boss mocked her in front of everyone, he expected tears. He expected her to lower her head. He expected her to apologize. Most people did. After all, nobody spoke back to him. Nobody challenged him. Nobody dared look him directly in the eye. But that night, inside a crowded restaurant filled with wealthy customers, nervous employees, and silent bodyguards, something happened that nobody expected. A young waitress accidentally bumped into his table. A glass tipped over. Cold water spilled across his expensive suit. The entire room froze. Every employee knew what usually happened when someone embarrassed Kang Min-jae, the feared businessman, the mysterious billionaire, the man rumored to control half the city from the shadows. The waitress braced herself. The manager immediately started shouting. Customers stared. Min-jae slowly stood. His dark eyes locked onto hers. Then he laughed. Not kindly. Mockingly. Lucky for you, you're only a waitress. The room became even quieter. Most people would have cried. Most people would have apologized repeatedly. Most people would have accepted the humiliation. Instead, the young woman calmly picked up the fallen glass. Then she looked him directly in the eye and said 3 words. Don't try that. The entire restaurant gasped. Even Min-jae looked surprised. Nobody had ever spoken to him like that before. And strangely, he couldn't stop thinking about her. But what happens next changes both of their lives forever. If you love Korean billionaire romance and mafia love stories like this, subscribe now to @Physial_Threads and turn on notifications so you never miss our next story. Her name was Zara. At 24 years old, she had already survived more hardship than most people experienced in a lifetime. She wasn't from a wealthy family. She didn't have powerful connections. She didn't have anyone waiting to rescue her. What she had was determination. And determination was often the only thing keeping her moving forward. Every morning before sunrise, Zara left her tiny apartment and walked through the busy streets of Seoul. Most people assumed she was a foreign student. Others assumed she was a tourist. Few knew she worked 2 jobs simply to survive. During the day, she helped at a community center. At night, she worked as a waitress. The schedule was exhausting. Yet somehow she always found time to help others. The elderly woman living next door. The struggling student downstairs. The delivery driver who looked too tired to smile. Everyone knew Zara. Everyone loved her. But few understood the scars hidden beneath her cheerful personality. Years earlier, she had been relentlessly bullied, mocked, excluded, humiliated. People had targeted her because she looked different, spoke differently, came from somewhere else. For a long time, she had allowed their words to break her. Until one day, she made a promise. Never again. Never again would she allow anyone to make her feel small. That promise would soon change her destiny. Meanwhile, across the city, Kang Min-jae lived in a completely different world. His mansion sat high above Seoul. Massive gates protected the property. Luxury cars lined the driveway. Security guards monitored every entrance. To outsiders, Min-jae had everything. Money, power, respect, fear. Yet inside the enormous mansion, loneliness echoed through every room. Most people only saw his success. Few saw the burden he carried. His father had built an empire through ruthless ambition. When his father died unexpectedly, Min-jae inherited everything. The businesses, the responsibilities, the enemies, the expectations. At only 32 years old, he had become one of the most powerful men in Korea. Yet power came with a cost. People feared him more than they loved him. Employees obeyed him. Partners respected him. But nobody truly knew him. And because of that, he had become cold, detached, emotionally unavailable. He trusted nobody, least of all strangers, which was why he completely misunderstood Zara the first time he met her. And that misunderstanding would soon change everything. The morning after the restaurant incident, Min-jae found himself thinking about the waitress again. It irritated him. Why was he thinking about her? Why did her words keep replaying in his mind? Don't try that. The confidence, the calmness, the refusal to be intimidated. None of it made sense. Most people feared him instantly. She hadn't. For the first time in years, someone had treated him like an ordinary man. And he didn't know how to feel about it. Across town, Zara had already moved on. At least she thought she had. She expected never to see him again. Powerful men lived in different worlds. Worlds far removed from hers. Unfortunately, fate had other plans. 3 days later, Min-jae returned to the restaurant. Not because he was hungry. Not because he enjoyed the food. Because he was curious. A feeling he rarely experienced. The manager nearly fainted when he arrived. Every employee rushed into action. Everyone except Zara. She simply greeted him like every other customer. Nothing more. Nothing less. The lack of special treatment annoyed him, then intrigued him. As the evening progressed, he watched her. Not openly. Subtly. He noticed things. She smiled at elderly customers. She helped a young mother carry food trays. She gave free soup to a homeless man standing outside. Most people treated kindness like a transaction. Zara treated it like breathing. Natural. Effortless. And for reasons he couldn't explain, he found himself watching her more and more. What he didn't know was that Zara had noticed him too. Not staring. Watching. Studying. Trying to understand why someone so powerful looked so unhappy. Because despite his expensive suits and intimidating presence, there was sadness in his eyes. A sadness she recognized. The sadness of someone carrying too much alone. Weeks passed. Their interactions remained brief. Simple greetings. Short conversations. Occasional disagreements. Yet something was changing. Slowly. Quietly. Neither of them realized it. But the distance between their worlds was beginning to shrink. Then one evening, everything changed. A wealthy customer started berating a young employee. The girl looked terrified. Nearly in tears. Most people ignored it. Zara didn't. She stepped between them. Politely but firmly. The customer became furious. His voice grew louder. The insults became crueler. Still, Zara refused to back down. Across the room, Min Jae watched the entire scene. Something unexpected happened. He felt angry. Not at Zara. At the customer. The man was humiliating someone weaker simply because he could. The same way people had once humiliated Zara. Without thinking, Min Jae stood. The room instantly fell silent. The customer's confidence vanished. Minutes later, he was leaving the restaurant. Humiliated. Defeated. For the first time, Zara saw a different side of Min Jae. A side hidden beneath his cold exterior. And for the first time, Min Jae saw Zara smile directly at him. Not politely. Not professionally. Genuinely. Neither of them realized it yet. But that smile would soon become impossible to forget. And meanwhile, something from Zara's past was quietly preparing to return. A shadow she thought she had left behind forever. A shadow that would force both of them to confront painful truths. And neither of them were ready for what was coming next. The smile should have been insignificant. Just a brief moment. A simple expression exchanged between two people. Yet for Kang Min Jae, it stayed with him long after he left the restaurant. For years, people had smiled at him because they wanted something. Business opportunities. Money. Influence. Protection. But Zara's smile had been different. There had been no calculation behind it. No hidden agenda. Just genuine appreciation. And somehow, that unsettled him more than any enemy ever could. The following week, Min Jae found himself returning to the restaurant again. Then again. Then again. His assistants began noticing. His bodyguards noticed. Even the restaurant staff noticed. Nobody dared mention it. Everyone simply assumed the billionaire liked the food. Only Min Jae knew the truth. The food was excellent. But it wasn't the reason he kept returning. The reason was serving tables. The reason carried trays. The reason laughed with customers. The reason seemed capable of making an ordinary room feel warm. Meanwhile, Zara noticed the pattern too. At first, she found it strange. Then amusing. Eventually, she simply accepted it. One evening, as she placed his meal on the table, she folded her arms. You know there are hundreds of restaurants in Seoul. Min Jae looked up. And somehow you keep ending up here. He raised an eyebrow. Are you complaining? Should I be? For a moment, they simply stared at each other. Then unexpectedly, Min Jae laughed. A real laugh. Not the cold, controlled smile people usually saw. An actual laugh. Several nearby employees nearly dropped their trays. They had never seen him laugh before. Zara noticed their reactions. So you can smile. The comment caught him off guard. Most people were careful around him. She wasn't. And strangely enough, he liked that. What neither of them realized was that a friendship had already begun forming. Quietly. Naturally. Without either of them planning it. Days turned into weeks. Their conversations gradually became longer. Sometimes they talked for 5 minutes. Sometimes 10. Sometimes the restaurant would be nearly empty before either realized how much time had passed. They discussed books, movies, food, travel, dreams, disappointments. The conversations were simple. Yet Min Jae found himself looking forward to them more than billion-dollar meetings. One rainy evening, Zara sat across from him during her break. The restaurant was unusually quiet. Rain tapped softly against the windows. For several moments, neither spoke. Then Min Jae asked a question. What do you want? Zara frowned. What kind of question is that? What do you want out of life? She looked surprised. Nobody had asked her that in years. Most people only asked about work, bills, responsibilities, not dreams. She stared out the rain-covered window, then smiled softly. One day, I'd like to own a restaurant. Min Jae listened carefully, not because he planned to do anything with the information, simply because he wanted to hear her answer. A restaurant. She nodded. But not a fancy one. Why not? Because people already have plenty of those. He leaned back. So what's different about yours? For a moment, Zara's eyes brightened, the way they always did when she spoke about something she loved. If I ever own a restaurant, everyone will be treated with respect. Min Jae stayed silent. She continued. I don't care if they're rich or poor, young or old, different races, different backgrounds. Everyone deserves kindness. The conviction in her voice surprised him. Most people dreamed about money, status, luxury. Zara dreamed about dignity. And somehow, that affected him more than he expected. What he didn't know was that those words would eventually change both of their lives. But first, the truth about Zara's past would finally come to light. Several days later, Min Jae arrived at the restaurant earlier than usual. As he entered, he immediately sensed something was wrong. The atmosphere felt tense, uncomfortable. Employees were whispering. Zara wasn't smiling. A woman stood near the counter. Elegant, well-dressed, confident. But the expression on Zara's face revealed everything. Pain. Old pain. The kind that doesn't disappear with time. Min Jae watched carefully. The woman laughed, then said something that made Zara's shoulders stiffen. Minutes later, the woman left. The smile disappeared from Zara's face entirely. That evening, she barely spoke. She worked quietly, avoided eye contact, left immediately after her shift ended. The next day, she didn't come to work, nor the day after. For reasons he couldn't explain, Min Jae became concerned. 3 days later, he finally asked the manager. The answer surprised him. The woman who visited? The manager sighed. Apparently they knew each other years ago. What happened? The manager hesitated, then spoke carefully. She was one of Zara's bullies. Min Jae froze. For the first time, pieces began fitting together. The confidence, the refusal to be intimidated, the way she defended others, the compassion she showed strangers. Suddenly it all made sense. She knew what it felt like to be powerless, and she never wanted anyone else to feel that way. Later that week, he found Zara sitting alone near a riverside park. The city lights reflected across the water. She looked peaceful, yet somehow fragile. He approached quietly. She noticed him immediately. Following me now? The joke was weak, forced, and Min Jae knew it. Instead of responding, he sat beside her. For several minutes, neither spoke. Finally, Zara sighed. You're not leaving, are you? No. She laughed softly, for the first time in days. Then her expression changed. The walls she'd built around herself began cracking. Slowly, painfully, and for the first time, she told someone the truth. Not the polished version, not the shortened version, the real version. The bullying started when she was young. Children mocked her appearance. Teenagers spread rumors. Adults ignored it. Teachers rarely intervened. Years of humiliation slowly convinced her she wasn't enough. Not smart enough. Not beautiful enough. Not important enough. At one point she had begun believing them. Every cruel word. Every insult. Every rejection. She stopped speaking up. Stopped defending herself. Stopped believing in herself. Until one day she realized something. If she kept allowing others to define her worth, she would never be free. So she changed. Not overnight. Not easily. But gradually. She rebuilt herself piece by piece. And eventually became the woman sitting beside him. Strong. Kind. Fearless. When she finished speaking, silence settled between them. Then something unexpected happened. Min Jae lowered his head. I owe you an apology. Zara blinked. What? He looked directly at her. When we first met. She stayed silent. I judged you. The words seemed difficult for him. I thought you were arrogant. Her eyes widened slightly. He continued. I thought you were rude. For a moment, embarrassment crossed his face. A rare sight. Then he said something he hadn't said in years. I'm sorry. The apology was simple, but sincere. And that sincerity mattered. Because powerful people rarely apologize. Especially people like Min Jae. Zara studied him, then smiled. The real smile. The one he'd become addicted to seeing. Apology accepted. Neither realized it. But that moment changed everything. Because friendship built on honesty becomes difficult to break. And over the following months, their connection deepened. Naturally, Effortlessly. They spent evenings talking, weekend mornings exploring hidden cafes, late nights discussing dreams. For the first time in years, Min Jae began looking forward to tomorrow, because tomorrow meant seeing Zara again. Meanwhile, Zara noticed changes too. The cold billionaire everyone feared wasn't actually cold. Not really. He was wounded, lonely, guarded. Someone who had spent years protecting himself from disappointment. And little by little, she helped him lower those walls. One evening, while walking through a night market, something unexpected happened. A little girl became separated from her parents. The child started crying. Immediately, Zara knelt beside her, comforting her, helping her feel safe. Minutes later, the parents arrived. Relieved, grateful, the family left. But Min Jae remained unusually quiet. What? Zara asked. He shook his head. Nothing. But it wasn't nothing. Because watching her with that child awakened something inside him. A future he had never allowed himself to imagine. A home. A family. A life beyond business. Beyond power. Beyond loneliness. And that realization terrified him. Because for the first time in years, he was falling in love. The problem? He wasn't the only one changing. Zara was falling too, though neither had admitted it. Not yet. But what happens next changes everything. Because one rainy evening, a single conversation would transform friendship into something much deeper. And neither of them would ever be the same again. The rain fell steadily over Seoul. Streetlights reflected across the wet pavement. Cars moved slowly through the evening traffic. Inside a small cafe overlooking the river, Zara sat across from Kang Min Jae. The conversation had started normally. A few jokes, a few stories, a few comfortable silences. But tonight felt different. Something had changed. Both of them could feel it. For months they had danced around emotions neither wanted to acknowledge. For months they had convinced themselves they were simply friends. But friendship wasn't supposed to make your heart race when someone entered a room. Friendship wasn't supposed to make ordinary moments feel extraordinary. And friendship certainly wasn't supposed to make two people miss each other after only a few hours apart. The truth had become impossible to ignore. Yet neither knew how to say it. Finally, Zara broke the silence. You've been staring at me for 5 minutes. Min Jae blinked. I have not. You absolutely have. I was thinking. About. His eyes met hers. For a moment, neither looked away. Then he said quietly, You. The word hung between them. Heavy. Dangerous. Honest. Zara felt her heartbeat quicken. For the first time since they met, she couldn't find a response. The confident woman who once challenged him in front of an entire restaurant suddenly felt nervous. And strangely, Min Jae looked nervous too, which was almost impossible to imagine. Finally, he exhaled slowly. Before I met you, I didn't think my life would ever change. She remained silent, listening. Every day felt exactly the same. His voice was calm, but vulnerable, a side of him few people had ever seen. I worked. He smiled faintly. I attended meetings. I signed contracts. I came home and repeated everything again. The smile disappeared. But then you spilled water on my suit. Zara burst out laughing. You still remember that? I remember everything. His answer came immediately, without hesitation, without thought, because it was true. He remembered every conversation, every smile, every argument, every moment. The realization left both of them speechless. Then finally, Min Jae spoke the words he had been carrying for months. I love you. The cafe suddenly felt very quiet. The rain continued falling outside. But neither noticed. Because everything important existed within that single moment. Zara stared at him. Not shocked. Not surprised. Because somewhere deep down, she had known this moment was coming. Just as she knew her answer. A smile slowly appeared. The same smile that had first captured his attention. The same smile that made even his worst days feel brighter. Then she whispered, I love you too. And just like that, two completely different worlds became one. The months that followed became some of the happiest either of them had ever experienced. For the first time, Min Jae stopped measuring success through money. For the first time, Zara stopped carrying every burden alone. They became partners. Not because they needed each other. Because they chose each other. And every day that choice grew stronger. Meanwhile, a secret was quietly taking shape. A secret Min Jae spent months planning. Months designing. Months protecting. Because he wanted to give Zara something she had never expected. Not jewelry. Not luxury cars. Not expensive vacations. Something much more meaningful. Her dream. Months earlier she had casually mentioned wanting to own a restaurant. Most people would have forgotten the conversation. Min Jae never did. Every detail remained stored in his memory. The way her eyes lit up, the passion in her voice, the vision she described. A place where everyone would be treated with dignity. A place where kindness mattered more than status. A place where nobody felt invisible. And so, quietly, he began building it. He purchased a property, hired architects, worked with designers, reviewed every detail personally. Not because he had to, because he wanted it to be perfect. Meanwhile, Zara had absolutely no idea. One afternoon, nearly a year after their relationship began, Min Jae drove her across the city. "Where are we going?" "You'll see. I hate surprises." "No, you don't." She smiled. "You're right." Eventually, they arrived at a beautiful building. The exterior looked elegant, but welcoming. Warm. Inviting. Different from the cold luxury often associated with wealth. Zara frowned. "What is this?" Min Jae handed her a small key. Confused, she accepted it. Then she noticed the sign. Her breath caught. Tears instantly filled her eyes. The sign displayed the restaurant name she had once mentioned during a random conversation months earlier. A conversation she assumed he had forgotten. He hadn't. He remembered every word. Slowly, she turned toward him. "You didn't." He smiled. "I did." Tears rolled down her cheeks. Not because of the building. Not because of the money. Because someone had listened. Someone had cared enough to remember. Someone had believed in her dream. And for Zara, that meant everything. The grand opening became one of the happiest days of her life. People from every background filled the restaurant. Students, families, workers, business owners, elderly couples, tourists. Everyone sat together, exactly as she had envisioned. Nobody was treated differently. Nobody was ignored. Nobody was made to feel less important. Watching from across the room, Min Jae realized something. This was the first time he had ever seen a dream become reality. And somehow, watching hers come true felt better than achieving any of his own. Several months later, beneath a sky filled with stars, he proposed. There were no reporters, no media, no grand spectacle, just honesty, love, and a simple question. "Will you marry me?" The answer came before he finished speaking. Yes. The wedding wasn't extravagant. It didn't need to be. Because the most important thing wasn't the ceremony. It was the promise. A promise to keep choosing each other. Every day, for the rest of their lives. And they did. Years passed. The restaurant flourished. Their love deepened. Their family grew. Soon they welcomed a beautiful daughter. Then a son. And suddenly, life became louder. Messier. More chaotic. And infinitely more beautiful. One afternoon, their daughter burst into the restaurant kitchen. "Daddy." Min Jae looked up. The little girl pointed dramatically. "Mommy burned the cookies again." Across the kitchen, Zara gasped. "I did not." "You did." Min Jae started laughing. The daughter laughed. The staff laughed. Then Zara grabbed flour and tossed it directly at her husband. The kitchen exploded into laughter. Years earlier, Min Jae couldn't imagine moments like this. Moments that weren't about power, or money, or responsibility. Just family. Simple. Ordinary. Perfect. Another year passed. One rainy evening, the restaurant closed early. The family gathered around a large table. Outside, rain tapped against the windows. Inside, warmth filled the room. Their son launched into an exaggerated story about school. Every detail became more ridiculous than the last. By the end of the story, even he was laughing. Min Jae laughed so hard he nearly fell from his chair. The children couldn't stop giggling. And Zara simply watched. Quietly. Happily. Years ago she had wondered if happiness like this existed. Now she was surrounded by it. Not because life was perfect, but because love had transformed it. And somehow, the best moments were still ahead. One sunny weekend, the family visited a large park. Butterflies floated through the air. Children ran across open fields. Laughter echoed everywhere. Their daughter chased butterflies. Their son chased his sister. And Min Jae secretly took pictures. Picture after picture. Especially of Zara. When she laughed. When she smiled. When she wasn't paying attention. Eventually she caught him. "Still staring at me?" He grinned. The exact same grin he had given her years ago. After all these years? He slipped an arm around her waist. "Always." She shook her head, but couldn't stop smiling. Because even now, after marriage, after children, after everything they had built together, he still looked at her the same way. As if she were the best thing that had ever happened to him. And perhaps she was. Years continued passing. The children grew older. The restaurant became famous throughout the city. Customers traveled long distances simply to experience the atmosphere, not because of the food alone, but because kindness had become part of the restaurant's identity. People felt welcome there. People felt seen. People felt valued. Exactly as Zara always wanted. Then came a random afternoon many years later. An ordinary day, or so it seemed. The restaurant bustled with activity. Customers filled every table. Staff hurried between orders. Laughter echoed throughout the room. Near the entrance, a man wearing a baseball cap quietly entered. Nobody paid much attention. He sat alone at a table, patiently waiting. Behind the counter, Zara glanced up, then immediately smiled. Even after all these years, she recognized him instantly. The baseball cap, the fake attempt at being unnoticed, the familiar expression. She walked over, trying not to laugh. "What can I get for you today, sir?" The man looked up. His eyes still carried the same warmth they had developed years ago. "The same thing I've been ordering for years." She folded her arms. "Oh, and what would that be?" A smile spread across his face. Then he reached for her hand. The same hand he had held through every challenge, every victory, every chapter, and softly said, "You." Immediately, several voices groaned from across the restaurant. Their now grown children looked horrified. "Mom, Dad, not again." The entire restaurant erupted into laughter. Even Zara couldn't stop laughing. The years disappeared. The memories remained. The love endured. The camera pulls back. The restaurant is full. Families are smiling. Friends are laughing. Employees are thriving. The dream is alive. Their children are happy. And the girl who once stood up to a powerful man and said, "Don't try that with me again," finally found the life she deserved. Not because someone rescued her, but because she never stopped believing in her own worth. And the man who once misunderstood her learned something equally important. The strongest people aren't those who inspire fear. They're the ones who inspire love. This story reminds us that true love isn't about power, status, wealth, or influence. It's about seeing someone for who they truly are. It's about healing old wounds instead of creating new ones. It's about choosing kindness when bitterness would be easier. Zara's strength came from refusing to let her painful past define her future. Min Jae's growth came from learning that vulnerability isn't weakness. Together, they proved that love can heal loneliness, restore confidence, and build a future neither person could create alone. Most importantly, they showed that respect is the foundation of every meaningful relationship. Because the moment someone truly sees your value, everything changes. If you made it this far, let us know where you're watching from, and comment your favorite moment below, like this video, and subscribe to @Physial_Threads for more emotional Mafia love stories.